Coming up on this episode of Crime Family, the disappearance of Tera Smith. This case is still unsolved today. It's about a 16-year-old high school student who goes missing one summer evening and doesn't return home. She overheard a couple days ago that Tera was having an inappropriate relationship with her taekwondo instructor.
But yeah, I feel like if they did search his car and his house and they didn't find anything, what else are they supposed to do? He had an alibi, or maybe he didn't, but they really kind of hit a dead end. What are they supposed to do? I feel like 6 months with no other leads is a long time. Yeah, it's always eerie when that happens, and there's no trace of them anywhere, there's no body, and there's nobody that knows anything. It's like, what happened? It's creepy.
Yeah, it's just like, how can something like that just happen? Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Crime Family. I'm your co-host AJ. I'm here with my two sisters, Stephanie and Katie, just like always. And this week, Steph is going to be telling us about a case that she's been researching and wanted to cover on the show. Okay, Steph, so go ahead, take it away and let us know which case you're going to be telling us about.
So today I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Tera Smith that happened in 1998. And there wasn't a whole lot of information on this case because this case is still unsolved today. It's about a 16-year-old high school student who goes missing one summer evening and doesn't return home. I assume none of you guys heard of it before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, me neither. I have not.
So Tera Smith was born in 1982 in Redding, California. And according to her family, she was a very well-liked human being. She had just a zest for life, and she loved horses. She loved being with her family. She was very outgoing and athletic. And in her freshman year of high school, she was wrestling champ of her high school. So when Tera Smith was 16 years old, she had everything going for her. She was gonna go far in life. She was very poetic, and she was a prolific writer. And she had hundreds of journals in her room that she would write in like every day. And like most teenagers like Tera, they were on the rebellious side. They wanted to have a little bit more independence and just didn't want to be like a goody two-shoe all the time. So she would like sneak out of the house, or she would go to parties when she said she was going to go to her friend's house, and she was just trying to live a more independent life. And her parents were trying to keep her on the right path, trying to keep her grades up and trying to just make her work a lot so she wouldn't try and be so rebellious. So Tera and her family, they owned their own business, and it was like a fun center, which was called Oasis Fun Center, and it was just had like bumper cars and mini golf and bumper boats. So it was just one of those fun places to work, and Tera would work there when she was a little kid as well, up until she was 16 years old. And on this particular day in August 1998, it was a summer day, and Tera was grounded because she had snuck out of the house the night before and went to a friend's house when she wasn't supposed to. So her mom had to run some errands, and she decided to take Tera with her just because she didn't really trust her being home by herself, and because she was grounded, she wanted to keep a close eye on her. So her and her mom went shopping and did some errands. But after they were running their errands, Tera went home, and her youngest sister was home at the time, and her mom dropped her off, and her mom went to work at the Oasis Fun Center. after her mom dropped her off, Tera decided that she was going to go jogging before she went to work, because she was working later that night at the family business. So on that evening of August 22nd, 1998, Tera was supposed to go to work, and her shift started about an hour after her mother's did, but Tera never showed up for her shift. And so her mom calls the house, and her younger sister answers the phone and says that Tera went out for a jog before she had to go to work, and Tera said that she was only going to be 20 minutes and that she'd be back home to get ready for work, but that she never came home. So at this point, Tera's mom leaves work and drives all around the neighborhood trying to see if she could find Tera out jogging. Maybe she just fell or something and like she needed help, or she was just looking for her just to see if she was lost track of time. But when her mom couldn't find her, that's when Tera's mom started calling all of her friends and calling her ex-boyfriends to see if maybe she went there or went to their house. But none of them knew anything about Tera's whereabouts. And Tera's mom said she didn't call the police right away because she thought maybe she was at a friend's house, or maybe she would just show up, she just lost track of time or whatever. But like I said, after she talked to her friends and they didn't know where she was, that's when Tera's mom started to panic, and at this point she still hasn't called the police. I'm not really sure why, but maybe she thought maybe she's 16, she'll show up. And like I said, she had a rebellious side, so maybe she just didn't want to go to work that day and was trying to skip out on work. So after she waited a little bit, one of Tera's friends had called back and said that she overheard a couple days ago that Tera was having an inappropriate relationship with her taekwondo instructor, and his name was Troy Zink. And Tera's mom didn't really believe it. She was like, oh, they're probably just friends. Like, he's a really good instructor.
So who was it that told her that? A friend?
One of her friends.
Oh.
That she called, and then they called her back to say, well, maybe she's with her taekwondo instructor because they were having this inappropriate relationship, according to the friend.
How old was the instructor?
He was 29.
Oh.
So, but according to Tera's family, like, they had no idea. They just thought like they just knew he was her taekwondo instructor. Like, obviously she's not gonna tell, even if she was having like a relationship with him. But this kind of put up like red flags for Tera's family, and that's when her family decided to call the police. Tera's mom and dad went over to Troy's house to go talk to him, which was around 9 o'clock that night, but he wasn't home, so obviously they just left. I mean, I don't know what they were gonna say, like, are you like seeing my daughter?
Yeah, were they going to approach him about that? I'm assuming, or was it just like, do you know where she is? Have you seen her or heard from her? Or were they like going to confront him about? I'm assuming they were going to confront him about the relationship.
I think they were going to confront him about the relationship, or see if he knew where Tera was. Like I said, her family had no knowledge of the relationship that Tera was having, and Troy was 29 at the time of Tera's disappearance, so you could see why it was a little bit of really bit sketchy for the family.
A little bit. It's a lot. That's pretty sketchy.
Tera's sister said that Tera idolized Troy and that she looked up to him, and she said that one day she mentioned that she thought it was kind of weird how she would talk about him, but she never put anything to, like, she never thought anything of it. She just thought it was Tera had this crush on her instructor, but she never really thought anything of it. So the family were out looking for Tera, trying to figure out like where she could be. And around 11 p.m. that night, Troy did call Tera's family, and he said that he did pick up Tera that night, but dropped her off about 1.5 miles away from her house, and that he went up to this hill called Hang Glider Hill. And that's where he went praying for 5 hours. This is the story he tells. It doesn't seem plausible to me. Like, I feel like this just seems a little bit sketchy.
I mean, it's plausible, but just highly suspicious.
When they went to the police, there was not a whole lot to go on. because she was 16, I mean, she never ran away from home before, but she did sneak out of the house once or twice, so the police thought maybe she didn't want to go to work, and that she was just out hiding somewhere and just, trying to be that little bit rebellious side of her. But
and I also think too, like, once it gets so far, you're almost don't want to go home even more because you're embarrassed that it had got that far. Like, her parents called the police and you're like mortified, so you just like waited out a little bit longer. So that could be what they thought was happening as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's like it's kind of embarrassing, like if it goes that far when it's literally nothing at all. But also
you come home, the police are there, it's like, oh no, like, and you're gonna be in so much trouble.
Yeah, but it's also like it's only gonna get worse the longer she stays away. So I mean, but yeah, she's only 16, but like, I mean, it's gonna be awkward and weird, but also it's gonna be the least awkward and weird if she just goes home now than it's ever gonna be. The longer she is away,
it's just gonna get worse.
Yeah.
So Tera's mother and father, like, they didn't want to just wait around just in case she showed up, or wait till the police decide to do something about it. So they decided to go back to their house and search her room, see if they could find any clues of where she might have went, or if there was any like truth to this relationship that she was having with Troy. And while they were searching her room, they did find some letters in her room that were written to Troy. And after reading one of them that was really long that they found, her parents thought that maybe she was planning on telling Troy that the relationship was over, because according to this letter that they were reading, it was her planning to go over to Troy's house to say that they couldn't see each other anymore. But Tera's mother says that she was thinking of, instead of going over there, she was thinking of just mailing the letter, because it was an envelope with a stamp on it, because maybe she felt like it'd be better if she told them in person, not just mail this big, huge love letter type thing.
Did her parents tell the police about the relationship? Because that's an illegal relationship, basically, right? Or did they just kind of not take it that seriously?
I will get into that in a few minutes.
Okay.
It goes into more detail about Troy and who he actually...
Did Troy admit to the relationship? Like, so when he called her parents back saying, oh yeah, I dropped her off, I went to pray, did they bring that up to him? Did he mention it? Did he deny it? Or like what?
He didn't deny it or say it was like deny it or tell the truth either way. Like, he didn't say anything. He just said I picked Tera up and I dropped her off a mile and a half home, and he was sticking to that story. That's the story he was sticking to. He didn't say whether they were in a relationship or not, or why he picked her up, or if she was headed to his house. But
I mean, I guess if she's headed to his house and he's picking her up, then obviously it implies there's a relationship going on. I feel like he wouldn't do that if there wasn't.
Yeah. So now Tera's family know that there was this relationship going on between them, and that maybe Troy did have something to do with Tera being missing. During the investigation, the family found out that Troy had a previous conviction for spousal rape back in 1992. According to some documents, he had forced his ex-wife to have sex with him at knife point, telling her that he was going to kill himself if they didn't have sex. But of course, when the police talked to Troy, he denies these claims. But while they were searching his home, because at this point, he's the only suspect because he was the last person to see Tera alive, like the last person to see Tera that night. So when the police decide to search his home during the investigation, they did find some sporting rifles and some shotguns in Troy's attic of his taekwondo studio. And he was already on probation because of the conviction of the spousal rape. So he wasn't allowed to have firearms on his property to begin with. But Troy claims that these firearms were his dad's, who was renting the space from him. And that's what he was basing his story off of, that they were his dad's rifles. And
he has an excuse for everything, this guy.
So he did have to go to court because he breached probation. So the jury didn't buy his whole story of the rifles not being his. And he was sentenced on June 24th, 1999 to 4 years in prison. And in 2001, he tried to appeal his conviction, but it was denied. Nothing about Tera's disappearance came out of Troy's conviction. Like, they never did look into him as like a potential like suspect. Well, he was a suspect, but they didn't find any evidence that he had anything to do with her disappearance. And Troy denies any involvement into Tera's disappearance. He did say that on the night, he did come out eventually and say that on the night that Tera disappeared, Tera had called him at work wanting to see him. And when he got home, she was standing in his driveway. And when he drove up into the driveway, Tera leaned into the driver's window and asked Troy for $2,000. But Troy said he didn't have that kind of money, and that even if he did, he wouldn't give it to her because he wanted to know why she wanted the money. I don't know if I buy this story, but I mean...
I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit inclined to believe... I don't know. I feel like that's just a very specific story to make up. Like, it's a very specific... Like, I don't know. I just think, like, of all the things he could have said, because I feel like most times if some people are trying to divert or they're trying to, you know, they won't go into specific detail about things. Like, won't say, you know what I mean? Like, I see the fact that, I drove home, she was in my driveway, she leaned into my window, asked me for $2,000. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's a very specific conversation to mention or to make up. So I feel like people usually are more... What I see is people are more vague. They'll be like, oh yeah, I did see her. She called me from work, wanted to see me. And when I got to my house, she was there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't go into details unsolicited, I feel. So I'm a little bit kind of would be leaning toward maybe thinking that's legit.
Yeah,
or maybe that did happen, just not that night. Like, maybe that's a story from like a random time.
And maybe she was going over to tell him that the relationship was off because when they found those letters, maybe that's what her intentions were. But we never know because she never came back home that night, so we don't know where she went, or even if she did go to his house. Or maybe she wanted $2,000 because she was looking to run away from her house. Maybe she wanted to get out of the town, and I have no idea.
But was there anything that precipitated that? Like, did she have a big fight with her parents like the day before or that day or something?
Well,
like,
she was grounded. Remember, she was grounded because
she
had snuck out of the house the night before, and she wasn't.
Oh yeah.
She wasn't allowed to go anywhere. She had to go like I said, she ran errands with her mom in the morning, and then she was supposed to go to work that night. So she wasn't allowed to go anywhere. So maybe she felt like she was being like how teenagers being dramatic, feel like a prisoner in her own home, like she couldn't her parents were being unfair because they were grounding her, you know what I mean? Yeah,
so she's like gonna come out, I'm gonna run away and get $2,000 and leave.
Yeah, but we don't know, like,
but we know the letter, she wrote the letter to him that she was gonna be going over to deliver that night. Like, do they know that was the letter for that night?
They don't know if it was for that night, but they did know that she did write this letter, and maybe she decided to just go over to his house and tell him in person instead of mailing the letter, because the letter did have a stamp on it, so it looked like she was going to mail it instead. But I guess she decided to go over to his house.
I keep forgetting this is like the 90s. I was like just text someone, give them a call. Yeah. Like, it's very weird, but
yeah, it kind of sounds like to me she was kind of ending that chapter in her life. Like you were saying, she was maybe being a dramatic teenager, her parents grounded her, and she just was thinking it's like the end of the world. And so she was saying goodbye to him, asked him for money, and then maybe he didn't give it to her, so she decided to, hitchhike or hitch a ride with somebody to get out of there because she didn't have any money. So that's kind of where my mind goes.
And Troy does say, like, when he didn't have the money to give her, that's when Tera, she got angry, but then asked for a ride back home. Or asked for a ride, and he says that he dropped her off a mile and a half away, which is on the road called Old Oregon Drive. And that's where she decided she wanted to go jogging before she head to work. Even though that Troy was questioned extensively into the disappearance of Tera, he was never officially considered a person of interest in Tera's disappearance. And Tera's father told Dateline that he felt that the police were not taking his daughter's disappearance seriously enough, and that he was becoming very frustrated. He said that at first they were doing their job and helping out and giving them all they had for about 6 months, but then her case just went cold and no one no one but the family were still searching for her. And that's when the case kind of just stopped. Like, the police never really looked into anybody else. They never looked into any of her friends or ex-boyfriends. It was just, her mother just says, like, they just stopped looking for her and stopped.
So they never named, like, another person of interest or suspect at all?
No.
I just find this so weird. Like, obviously, so they just didn't care. They just dropped the investigation. Like, why would they not? I guess if there was no evidence of anything, they can't. There's no one else to name as a suspect.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, like, there was no body. Like, they never found her body. They never found any other evidence of foul play or anything like that. So there's nothing for them to really go off of.
But I mean, doesn't it seem like they really looked too hard into this? Sorry, what's his name again? The taekwondo guy?
Troy.
Oh, Troy. It doesn't seem like they really looked into him that much. I mean, they searched his house and found the guns and whatever, but, like, I don't know. I feel, or maybe they did look into him more than we know, but I just feel like.
But yeah, I feel like if they did search his car and his house and they didn't find anything, what else are they supposed to do? He had an alibi, or maybe he didn't, but they really kind of hit a dead end. What are they supposed to do? I feel like 6 months with no other leads is a long time for them to be, like, searching for something that's not there. And it's probably still open, right? They just aren't, it's just cold, so they don't have anything else to go on.
Yeah, the case is still open. And her family, like I said, her mother still has hope that she's still alive out there and one day she'll come home. But her dad did tell Dateline that within the first 48 hours of her missing, he kind of lost hope that she would be coming home alive. Just because, after 48 hours, you don't find somebody, like, who went missing. There's always, like, each hour after that is kind of this desperate call, but...
Yeah, and I also feel if she did decide to run away, not reaching out to your family for over 20 years is very extreme, right? You think you'd get over that and be like, okay, I'm fine, this is where I am. And it didn't seem like there was anything that was that dramatic in her life for her to be like, I'm cutting my family off and never talking to them again, especially her sister, right? So it does seem like something happened that she didn't plan for, because I think it's super rare for people just to kind of disappear and never reach out again.
Yeah, like, especially a fickle teenager who's going to be angry one minute and then, 2 days later it's like, okay, I'm homesick, I want to go home. You know what I mean? Like, not someone who's going to, like, stay away for 24 years.
Yeah, and I know that this case, there's not, like, a lot to it, and the reason why I chose it was because, like, it was just kind of like this, I wouldn't say one-sided, like, they only interviewed one person and that was it. They didn't interview, like, any of her friends. They didn't interview any of her ex-boyfriends or, like, anybody like that. They just interviewed this Troy guy. They didn't find anything on him, and that was that. Even though he had a previous conviction of abuse.
Well, then what were they doing for 6 months? They must have been looking into other people. They just didn't release any details because they didn't find anything, maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Like, they probably did look into people, but they just didn't come out with...
Oh, I mean, I was sorry. I mean, they're probably, like, dissecting all of her notes and journals and stuff. Like, that's probably what they were doing for 6 months, to try to see if there was a clue in any of it, but it doesn't sound like there was really any other, besides this Troy guy. Like, if that, I guess what Katie was saying before, like, if that doesn't lead to anything, like, there's literally nothing else to go on besides her own writings or her own journals, and if that doesn't give them anything, then...
Yeah, and also I feel like if she was going to run away, she'd probably at least tell one of her close friends, so they would at least know what was going on. But the fact that none of them knew anything, it kind of makes me think that she was not planning on, leaving for that long on purpose.
If they had, like, looked through all of her notes and stuff, you'd think... Because my other thought was, like, well, was there someone else that maybe she was secretly with or something, and she was, like, running away to be with this person? But, I mean, obviously, if they went through her notes and all of her stuff and journals and stuff, then, like, that probably would have come up if she's writing in her journal every day. So the fact that, like, nothing like that came up, obviously that's probably not it. But so either potentially this Troy guy possibly did something, or she just hitchhiked and met someone at wrong place, wrong time. I feel like that has to be the only two.
Or maybe this is just me thinking out loud. Maybe she needed that $2,000 because maybe she was in some type of trouble and needed to pay somebody $2,000. You never know, like, teenagers hide things sometimes depending on who they are, but maybe she had some type of debt that she had to pay, and who knows, like.
Yeah, that's true. I guess why $2,000? Maybe that's just the amount she came up with, but that seems like a lot for her if she wanted just to like catch a bus somewhere or something. But I don't know.
That's why I feel like, I don't know, when you were telling that part of that story that Troy told about her mentioning that to him about wanting $1,000, I don't know. I just feel like that's like a specific number, and it's, yeah, if she just wanted to catch the bus, like she just needed a little bit, like $2,000 is a lot for whatever, if she was planning to go away for a specific amount of time or she would need that much money. Or I just don't feel like that's a story that someone would make up if they were lying. You know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna say that unprovoked. That's just what I feel.
Yeah, I think like it is a weird thing just to make up. There probably is some truth to it, but
could have just been like another night that happened that's unrelated to this. Like it could have been like way before that, and he just is saying that for that night. But I feel like at some point maybe that did happen, because it is a very random story to just create.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like maybe he's just making up this whole story, and maybe he did pick her up and something happened and he didn't want to break up with her and he did something to her, but no evidence
Allegedly.
to prove. Yeah, there's no evidence to prove that he did anything.
No.
And there's no body anywhere, so.
He could also know what happened to her as well. Like you were saying, he was in jail before, right? So, I don't know, maybe he just met some people and then she kind of met those people as well and then just got into the wrong crowd. He may know who did something to her, but isn't going to say anything. Or he could have been on it together, who knows?
He did have those sporting rifles, so maybe he was part of this, like, sporting team or something that she was a part of, and something bad happened, and he just doesn't want to admit.
Yeah, maybe, because if around guns, he's not supposed to be. So that would just get him into more trouble, I guess, if something happened while they were, like, playing around with the guns. I don't know. But you'd think, like, it was an accident, and he was a decent person. He would tell people what happened. And even still, he'd have to, like, hide the body and stuff, so it'd just be more work than just coming clean.
But I feel like, also though, when you think about it, like if something did happen by accident and like she accidentally got shot or something playing with the guns or whatever, and it was just an accident, like I feel like he's going to think, well, I have this criminal record. No one's going to believe me if I just say it's an accident. Like, who would believe I have this record of a violent history? Like, so I feel like in like the heat of the moment or like a panic, he could have just tried to cover it up because he's like, well, who's going to believe that it was an accident, even if it legitimately was? Who knows? I don't know what goes through would go through someone's mind in that scenario. But
yeah, so like as of right now, there is no new suspects into the disappearance of Tera Smith, and the case is still open to this day. At the time of Tera's disappearance, she was 16. She was 5'7", and she weighed about 135 pounds. And she had a strong athletic build, blonde hair, and she didn't have any scars or any birthmark. And she would now be 40 years old. If anybody has any information on Tera's whereabouts, you can contact Crime Stoppers or contact the Shasta County Police Department at 530-245-6135. And that is the story of Tera Smith. Like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of information. It was kind of cut and dry, but it's still kind of a weird story how she just disappeared and has never been found.
Yeah, it's always eerie when that happens and there's no trace of them anywhere. There's no body and there's nobody that knows anything. It's like, what happened? It's creepy.
Yeah, it's just like, how can something like that just happen? Like, how can somebody just go missing, vanish without a trace for 24 years and no one knows a damn thing? I mean, someone knows, obviously, but it's just so crazy.
And I'm always so hesitant to do cases like this because where there's not a lot of information on it, there's not a lot of research you can do on it. So you never know. Like it's just hard to do research on something there's just not a lot of information on it. But I found it interesting because she's still missing till this day, and nobody knows anything, and there hasn't been any new suspects or anything like that. So
I was gonna say, it's always interesting because just like you said, like somebody knows something out there and they're not coming forward, or maybe they don't even realize that they know something, or she actually did disappear on purpose. somebody could have seen her but just not know who she was and still not realize. But also there's somebody out there that may have done something to her and they for sure know what happened or where she is, and they're just never going to say anything about it, which is kind of crazy, like how that would weigh on your conscience, you feel. But I guess some people think differently.
Yeah, and like, unless you're just to believe that she, you know, fell off the side of the road and hurt herself and just died of, you know, in nature somewhere where no one saw her, like, then no one would know literally anything. But unless that happened...
But somebody would have found something, right?
Yeah.
Why hasn't anyone found a body on the side of the road or, you know, like a bone randomly, her clothes? Somebody would have found something, and the fact that they didn't find anything, somebody hid her really well. Or, you know, you always think of human trafficking. Someone took her somewhere where we will never find her because she's in a different country or something. So, yeah. Yeah,
the vanished without a trace ones are always interesting because, like I said, it's just always so fascinating to me how somebody can just vanish. And
I know. You always go to the worst case scenario too, though, because there are those cases where people are abducted and they're held captive for decades and then they finally emerge. So you just never know what you could be going through, even if she is alive out there somewhere. So you try to think about those things, but you never know.
Yeah, well, in these ones where, like, you know, they've been missing for, this one is 24 years, but in those cases where they're gone for a long time, you know, I feel like your first initial thought is like, well, there's no chance that they're actually alive still. But like you said, there are those times where you hear those cases where it's like somebody's discovered like 15, 20 years later and like they're alive. So those do happen. And so I always try to like not just jump to that conclusion. Well, it's like, well, clearly she's not alive anymore, because that's the natural conclusion to jump to when you don't hear from somebody for 24 years. But it is possible, you know, anything is possible.
Yeah. And even like we said, it could be her choice. She just really decided she didn't want to be a part of that family anymore, and she left and is not going to tell anybody where she is.
And also, too, I feel like it's a lot more common for, even in the 90s, the late 90s, I still feel like cases where people vanish without a trace is a lot more, it's a lot easier for that to happen back in the 90s or the 80s and all that stuff, before they had modern technology, before they had cell phone pings that could like ping your location, all that stuff. Like, I mean, obviously it still does happen where people just vanish and no one knows what happened, but I feel like now there's a lot more different ways that they'd be able to sort of find at least like a trail of her. Like, even if they don't find her, they could still find where her cell phone last pinged, or like something to go on, or a text message to someone where she said something, you know. Whereas before, obviously before all that, it's just so easy for someone to just vanish. So that does it for this week's episode. If you like the show and you want to follow us, you can find us on all the social medias. We're on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. We're on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1, and we're on Facebook at Crime Family Podcast. You can send us your case suggestions, your feedback or tips or anything like that. Get in touch with us via email. Our email is crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, which is crimefamilypodcast.ca, and there you can listen to all of our episodes. You can read transcripts of the episodes. You can even leave us a voicemail if you would like. You might be able to hear your voice on the show. Thank you for all the support for the show. We know that you guys are really liking the season and we enjoy doing it, so we love to be in touch with you. So send us those emails, DM us on Instagram, all that good stuff. So yeah, until next time, take care.
Bye.
See ya.